Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, what's the hell going on in Bangladesh? Apparently, this is the first Gen Z led revolution that has become successful. But on the other hand, if you listen to Indian media, especially the right wing media known as Godi media, it looks like the world is falling apart. Everything is melting down. And what makes this narrative so different from Indian viewpoint versus what really happened in Bangladesh, which is a popular revolution? My job is to explain that to you from a non-expert, from a layman viewpoint. Well, what's the background? Here is the background. Sheikh Hasina, the president of Bangladesh Awami League, has been in power in Bangladesh for last 15 years. During this time, there is supposed to be 4 elections. Out, except for one, the first election when she was elected fair and square, it is believed that rest of the elections were not elections at all. Nobody really got to vote, and at the least they were fraudulent. At the most, nobody could really cast their vote. But she kept on staying in power. And as she stayed on power, she became more and more and more tyrannical, to the extent that this is a nation of 170 million people. People thought they are living in an open prison because they had absolutely no freedom. Even clicking a like button on a Facebook post was thought to be really dangerous. Now, how dangerous it became. During Sheikh Hasina's time, it was quite normal for any dissident or even a perceived dissident to be picked up by secret police, take them to secret torture chamber, lot of extrajudicial killings, harassment, sacking from job, and even the torture of the family became the usual norm. Now there has been a lot of evidences are coming out, even situations worse than what was originally thought of. Now, to keep her in power and to control that state apparatus, the police force, the paramilitary force known as RAB, Rapid Action Battalion, everything became her tool, and the whole country became her asset. She became so tyrannical is that she lost any decency in her open public statements about private citizens of Bangladesh, even about the whole country. One specific example of such ludicrous comment was the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, known as the banker of the poor, who is internationally as well as domestically so much revered. Her comment about him was that he should be drowned in the Padma River just enough so he gets a taste of drowning, but he really doesn't die. She was suggesting open torture. She is known to make public comments repeatedly. While this country belongs to me, this country is made independent by my father, my family sacrificed, as if the 170 million people have nothing else to do, has nothing to do with the country, and they are just slaves eating out of her plate and living in the country and taking away her share. Her nepotism went to such an extent that her own son has been made, quote unquote, the advisor for ICT with an incredible amount of salary per month. And one of her nieces have been nominated by her to be World Health Organization representative of Bangladesh, whose credentials is as best at a very controversial state. So this is the example of our tyranny. Now, how she stayed in power. The way she stayed in power is clear that she had a Faustian pact with India. Her pact could be only be described as a slave master relationship in India. So, as part of this pact, she remained completely loyal to India. India gave her every kind of coverage that is needed, from material to diplomatic coverage, even strongly lobbying for her when her abuses came out and United States wanted to impose sanctions, and so as the other Western countries. So it was clear that without India's implicit and explicit help, she could never stay in power. Now, such a dictator who seemed to be so secure in her position and made the whole state apparatchiks into her personal assets, how did she how was she deposed? How is it possible? And especially with such a speed that within 2 weeks she was out of power and she had to escape, leaving everything. She had to escape in India. Her master. Well, here is the background. Here comes the students. In the past, political parties have tried different campaign related to election and other stuff, but they have all failed. However, this time the campaign began from the students because in Bangladesh, handed down from the British colonial system, there is a quota system, and over 30% of the quota of the government job, which are really lucrative jobs, were reserved for quote-unquote Mukti Jodhas, the so-called the Liberation War warriors, a war that was fought in 1971. So by now, all the Mukti Jodhas are either dead or they're well into their retirement. So this over 30% quota was used by Hasina and her Awami League to basically pack in the government cadre with her known loyalists, blind supporters, and her goons. Therefore, this was an easy way to control all the levers of power. So initial student-led protest was against this quota system. They wanted a meritocracy, accepting leaving quota only for the disabled, only for the handicapped, as well as for the minorities. However, as it happens, government response was dictatorial. So in response to this, she sent her police force, her personal force, as well as her paramilitary force to kill the students. And hundreds of them died. Even more number became maimed, blind, and wounded. There has been a lot of amputation of the upper and lower extremities. And in response to this, the disgust spread nationwide, and the student movement turned into quote-unquote non-discrimination movement based on only one claim, that she has to leave power. Finally, the students on the 5th of August called for a long march of the nation to Gano Bhavan, so-called the People's House, where the Prime Minister stays and where the Prime Minister resides. So in response to such a widespread cruelty and violence, basically the whole nation galvanized together, from rickshaw puller on the street to office bosses, from housewife to elementary school students, to university students, to day laborers, to industrialists. Everyone came to the street and started protesting, and they started a long march towards the Gano Bhavan. Now, at this time, the only option of Sheikh Hasina, the dictator, was the military. And she had already used military, at least 1 or 2 units of the military, actually the day before, fired at the protester. But this time, military took the right decision. Military refused to fire on the citizens of the nation, being their job is to protect the people, to be loyal to the people as opposed to work against the people. So she had no other option other than to leave. She hurriedly resigned and she took her helicopter. Ultimately, she reached New Delhi in India, her master, and that's where she's staying, and she's directing her further move from there. Now, so this is how the almost what seemed like an untouchable, powerful dictator, how rapidly she was blown out of power. Now, what is the implication? And how did India respond? Let's talk about India's response. So as you can see, India has been caught totally flat-footed at the event in Bangladesh. During this time, the doctrine of Indian foreign policy in South Asia is the doctrine of dominance. And Bangladesh, vis-a-vis Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League, and India's relationship with that is the highlight of the doctrine of dominance. With the sudden loss of such a surrogate, India has been completely caught off guard. And one evidence of that is India could not come up with any reasonable or comprehensive reason for such an event. So India raised the issue of quote unquote Hindu issue about the Hindu minorities. Now, in the post-revolution chaos, even for more than a week, the police force disappeared, as happens because dictators makes everything of all the state apparatus as their personal property. So with the fleeing of Sheikh Hasina, her police force disappears, melted down. So Bangladesh was without any police force for more than a week. Imagine what will happen to us if we don't have a police force in the United States for 1 week, or New York City doesn't have a police force, or city of Houston or Chicago doesn't have a police force for more than a week. In that regard, actually, Bangladeshis have been very, very disciplined. Students and community leaders came forward. They maintained law and order. During this chaos, there has been some isolated revenge attacks on Awami League leaders. And it is well known in Bangladesh that disproportionately more Hindus are supporters of Bangladesh Awami League because of their close relationship with India, especially BJP, Hindutva supremacist India. And disproportionately more leaders of Hindu community are in Awami League, as well as they have been a lot more privileged. Proportionate job of Hindu minority in the government is far exceeding that of Hindu population in Bangladesh. This is well known. So in this chaos, some of the attacks have been in Hindu community. However, coloring that into an anti-Hindu campaign is totally wrong, and only reason it has been brought up because India doesn't have any better response. Now, if you analyze this in the light of India's other foreign policy failures, unfortunately, this is one in a series of India's failure in the regional area. While India's relationship with Sri Lanka in the south is very low, the latest row being on the fishing, India's relationship with its northern neighbor, which is Nepal, is all-time low, and Nepal's current prime minister is probably the most anti-Indian prime minister in Nepalese history. Just last year, India had a very humiliating exit from the Maldives, and China has been invited back in place of India. And finally, this is the last nail on the coffin, is Bangladesh debacle, failure of Bangladesh foreign policy in India. Rather than taking the responsibility and rationalizing actually what happened, so India's response has been a very short-sighted and an embarrassing response to bring up the Hindu issue. And another reason it has been a failure upon failure, because for last couple of decades, Indian minorities, Indian Muslims, Indian Christians, as well as Dalits who are Hindus, are in worse shape than they have ever been in India. Daily lynching of Muslims, daily demolition and bulldozing of their homes, their mosques, is a daily event that everybody can watch on video. And when India takes the issue of quote unquote Bangladesh minorities in such a situation, what is happening in India, that infuriates the people in Bangladesh even more. It's like spreading salt on an open wound. Now, what is the implication of this? As I said, in the light of series and successive failures of Indian foreign policy in this region, there is an opportunity of realliance and the geopolitical resetting of a geopolitical strategy in this region. I believe, at least at this time, there is a great opportunity for United States and for the liberal democracies to reach out in the region and to reach and build appropriate bridges and to gain strategic as well as a demographic advantage. How that is possible? Because by the very nature of Bangladesh movement, the student movement, Gen Z-led movement, the demographics is in favor of the Western liberal democracies. There is a natural feat of anti-discrimination movement in Bangladesh with the values of that of liberal democracy. This is a golden opportunity. If West misses, this will be one of the historical mistakes at this point. In addition to that, geographically, Bangladesh is located at a very valuable geographic asset in addition to its market of 170 million people. Both Bangladesh and India are intertwined. They have about 4,000 kilometers of border, which is relatively porous. In addition to that, Bangladesh has access to Bay of Bengal as well as Indian Ocean as a result of that. And there is another reason for that, is that also China will be very interested in this area. China has already invested $7 billion, mainly in the form of infrastructure development in Bangladesh. And having an access on the eastern flank of India on Bay of Bengal and therefore Indian Ocean will be also a very strategic advantage of China, in addition to its business relationship and the market of 170 million people. However, at this time, as I said, the natural feat of the value of this movement, non-discrimination movement, a movement of the rank and file, and especially of the young people in this young nation altogether, has a natural feat of that of the Western value of non-discrimination and all-inclusive liberal democracy. And one last thing, after the humiliating exit from Afghanistan, this is actually a nice opportunity of showcase of United States that it can forge an alliance with a Muslim majority country of 170 million people based on democratic, specifically liberal democratic values. So here we can end. If you have any questions, concerns, you can always make a comment. And as a layman citizen, as a as a lay public, I can give my two pieces and see if our ideas rings with that of you, and we can exchange our ideas. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.